You're listening to Freight Famous, presented by Rose Rocket, bringing you the people that make trucking move. From behind the scenes into the limelight. Here's your host, Justin Bailey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Freight Famous, a podcast produced by Rose Rocket. New episodes of Freight Famous will be brought to you about twice a month. On this podcast, we talk with guests about how they build, scale, and automate their trucking business. If you have a trucking business, transportation business, logistics business, supply chain business of sorts, you might be looking for that type of software. Or you might know someone who is. If you do, I've got some good news. Rose Rocket has free money to give you. That's right, free money. All through our special incentivized referral program. To learn more, email us at referralpartners@roserocket.com. I'm your host, Justin Bailey, co-founder at Rose Rocket. And today with me and my guest is Andrew J. Gomez, owner of AJG Transport. Now, you probably haven't heard of AJG Transport, and that's okay. They are a trucking company, as the name would indicate. But what's super interesting about this company, and more so really Andrew, I'm gonna say, is he started this company when he was 17 years old. Today they have 106 trucks. He's still only 26, but man, when you listen to him talk, he is knowledgeable, he is wise, he is measured, he is calm, he is somebody that I think we could all aspire to be. And I think it's super interesting that he comes at it from a this like really almost like way wise beyond his years type. Even his presentation, if you're going to watch, you'll just see he's a very calm, measured individual. But he has this sort of this youthful aspect to him because he's only 26, and I think it's this really great combo of he sees the world through fresh eyes, but again having this real wisdom to him. It was a great conversation. I learned a lot, and if you like the idea of hearing somebody who's gone through a struggle, persevering, and just used a lot of mental toughness and positive mental attitudes to get there, then this is totally a show for you. Andrew, thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, glad to be here, Justin. Excited to talk about the number one thing that I love and hate.
Okay, cool. Well, me too, probably. So tell me about yourself, man. How did you get here, and what's your background?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I like to always say I was born in a truck. I mean, at this point, we're just all the way back from whenever I was born, my family's been in trucking, just in, small, owning one or two units, being an owner operator for a long period of time. By the time I hit around, 15, 16, I was already working for my brother out there. He had his own company, started out in 2010. And basically that was whenever Amazon was going crazy. So at that point, I hit my high school senior year. I was already working night shift, and then I'd get up and go to school. But then at that point, once football season ends, there ain't nothing else to do, and you're already getting ready for college. So we finished up there, and then slowly but surely trucking started to just get deeper and deeper into my roots as I started to figure out what was going on and what opportunities were around me. And then, yeah, man, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears from there. It feels like a snap of a finger almost now. But at the same time, just looking back, a lot of things that happened, a lot of missed birthdays, a lot of missed quality time, but for good reason. You get going, and now in hindsight, it's a great venture. So that's as simple as I could explain it. I would say getting into trucking and now into some other smaller ventures, or I'd say future ventures, like real estate and other things. But we're trucking along.
Well, you're still a young man, so I'm going to say this has been a bit of a snap of the fingers for you. It's a pretty it's a pretty amazing. Just kind of reading through these notes, and we'll talk more about kind of where you are today. So you graduate high school, you just start working right away. There's sort of two things we're talking about here, because we're talking about the aspect of starting a trucking company, being in trucking, but let's give a little bit of airspace to the entrepreneurial enthusiasm, because I think being able to get after it at that age, like I've got a kid who's going to graduate this year. He's not starting a business next year, guaranteed. Yeah. So yeah. And so where does that come from? How did you have the sort of the mindset and the all the qualities and things that are required just to, like, you had youthful enthusiasm on your side, but besides that, like, there's a lot of things you were lacking. You didn't have a lot of life experience. There's a lot of things that weren't there. So how did you do that? Like, what would you chalk that up to?
So, a couple of key things. The first thing that I remember very clearly was just the fact of, just that common disdain that you have for people telling you to put your phone away, for, cleaning up bathrooms, and then of course drinking water out of garden hoses, like I was happy. I mean, the reason I'm religious today is because they kept sending me to Sonic, and I was like, I ain't stopping. I love Jesus. That's just kind of how it was back then. And just realizing how far a dollar went back then, and how much good it can do, really positioned me to a point where I said, I want to be something greater, and I want to continue to push and sacrifice as much as I can to get there. Now, I will say it was the same thing in high school sports back then. I was always just focused on trying to be the best I possibly could, and I didn't know how. So I was working out 3 times a day, but not eating anything. So then I ended up being like 135 pounds, and it didn't work out. I didn't end up going to any college football, doing any college football. But at the same time, it put that work ethic in me that really sprouted something for the future. It allowed me to handle a lot of adversity early, and also justify it. And I think that was really big for the very start of whenever I started the company, because I had no idea what to expect, especially when I signed my name on the dotted line. I only half knew what I was expecting, just like everybody else who starts their company. It's like, oh, like I'm gonna, be my own boss, and I'm gonna start, taking the punches. And I didn't realize that you're changing an 8 to 5 for a 24-hour job,
Hmm.
but you don't feel that until you're 6 months, a year in, you're 12 months in, and you know that the bank has got 12 more payments the next year. So you have to work, and there's no other excuse. And so you have to have things like perspective. You have to, there's so many different things that I had to go through from a mindset perspective to keep my fire lit, because there was a lot of times where it was extremely dim, just like any other entrepreneurs, you're growing. And so that's one thing that I definitely tell younger entrepreneurs, and a lot of people who've reached out who'd want to start trucking companies is, whenever you sign your name on that dotted line for a contract of a new truck, you're changing your lifestyle. And it's not passive income. It's not, if anything, it's the least passive thing that I've done. But at the same time, if you can grow in it, that type of chaos, there's not much that you can, that you won't be ready for. You'll go and you'll see other people's normal problems, and you'll kind of, laugh with your buddies who are already trucking, who've, been stuck in the middle of a winter storm, and they know that their families are home for Thanksgiving and they can't be there. It's just that type of perspective is stuff that I never would have realized. But I did have one other final thing. I think a lot of it, especially when I was young, was I was a great listener. I lived vicariously through everyone. If you had a book on, great philosophers and successful people, you had a book on Hitler or somebody who is terrible, and that way you know how not to do things. That's just one thing that I saw that I was able to really grab hold of, and of course, avoiding things best I could. I mean, I was raised up in more of a well, I found my own way in a Christian background area, because like I said, they had food and I was gonna be there. But at the same time, it was a mix of those things that allowed me to focus on fighting adversity early and dealing with it. Initially, you compartmentalize it, especially as entrepreneurs. It's a lonely road, but at the same time, the best of them end up figuring out how to deal with them in a healthy way, and then being able to execute day after day in the mental marathon that is, even on the computer end and the office end. It's a mental marathon. So that's kind of where it started, and I think those are some key qualities that I would have, that I would want to highlight in regards to my journey so far, especially in the early days.
So just to just set the frame here, how old were you when you started the company?
I was 17.
And how old are you now?
I'm 26.
And how many trucks do you have?
Total, you're looking around 106.
So
Yeah.
106 trucks. And even at like as much as you've put 10 years into this, and you are by all accounts now moving into mastery from just hours put in, and a veteran in the space, you're still only 26 years old. And for you, probably some days you feel still 16 with what you don't know, and other days you probably feel 96. And I think that and this is more for framing for the listeners to, who aren't seeing you and can't appreciate that. So I think it's a pretty remarkable story to get there. So I really want to actually talk a little bit about like the beginnings. When you talk about like signing a piece of paper, like who's giving you a loan for a truck at 17 years old? Like, let's be like practical. Like, how did you kind of go from, sort of stepping along the way just to get into it? Because you say people are calling you and asking you about starting trucking companies, and there's gonna be people listening saying, how the hell do I grow my fleet to 106 trucks, right? And so let's talk about a little bit practically about how you did this.
Yeah, well, of course, yeah, nobody's gonna sign it at 17. So overall, whenever I started the company and got everything going, you're kind of developing your DBA. I consider it starting as whenever I went to the house and got my DBA. When I first got those first 2 units, it was past my 18th birthday, and then I was figuring out how to. My initial inclination was I need to go where I know those people. Let me go to and talk to these, the people at Freightliner, which is my local Freightliner at Converse. Let me talk to them. Let me see if they can give me a deal. Let me see if there's some type of truck that they're willing to get rid of, and have it, since there was. Now I know the financier to this day. At this point, he financed me I wanted just one truck. He ended up being able to finance me for two. And so being able to do that was definitely a great opportunity for me. But those were trucks that they were not going to last very much. So it's like they knew what they were doing. And then, of course, they were giving me the highest interest rate possible.
Sure. Yeah.
And I didn't know, right? I mean, at
Yeah.
14, 15% interest back then was unheard of. But at the same time, it's like, I have to prove my worth, and I was aware of that. And so I was working for the bank for quite some time. Heck, I barely paid off those units probably only recently, a couple years ago, and it's because, that's just the paying your dues. And so that's the realistic part, and the practical part of getting into this business. It's you have to pay to play, and you have to suffer first in order to figure something out. Like, it's not you're coming in and then it's very few. I've heard very few stories where you come in, you have a great opportunity already, something extremely lucrative, and you buy trucks, and then all of a sudden you just leave it be. Like, I get it. Maybe you're working FedEx, maybe you're working something big, or you're a part of a great logistics network. But at the same time, for guys who are just coming in and they're trying to figure out everything themselves, or they're drivers, or they just came out of school, that's unrealistic. And so for me, a lot of the after I signed my name on the dotted line, I had to put pen to paper. What I had to figure out was, what do I need to make in order to execute this correctly? And then anything I make additionally, I am going to save it, because I don't have any overhead. Like, I don't have a family. I don't have any like, I just got to pay for food. I don't even pay for rent. I live with my family. So at the same time, back then, it was a lot easier. It was easier to make those adjustments, and just all I had to do was just pay for a gym membership, and I was just either working or working out, and that was it. And that's kind of how I kept my sanity a little bit. And so as we move forward from a practicality standpoint, the difference between then and now as well was I started working whenever Amazon was booming in 2015, 16. They had so much logistics that they didn't know what to do with. So they were giving me loads from San Antonio to Kettleman City, California for, $4 or $5 a mile. Of course, I'm going to be able to make additional profit on top of what I'm doing. And then I got to save it as much as possible so that I can buy the next truck. That was my thought process. I had a lot of great help. I was very appreciative of what my family was doing. But back then we didn't really have much. So the bottom line was we had to really fend off the banks 12 months a year, and continue to fight. And then we've realized that the only way you can grow in a trucking company is to just buy more trucks. There's no other way of revenue unless you go find different positive ways of revenue, or you find different trailers, which is something that we've done in the past. But you're either going to be lucrative, and you'll like your truck size, or you're going to have to keep growing until you're able to your revenue ends up outweighing a lot of your liabilities. And so it was kind of a race against that. consistently for the past like 2 years after. It was okay, I got 2 trucks. Now I got 5 trucks. Now I got 10 trucks. And the problem is more trucks, less you have less eyes on each truck. You're having more repairs, you're having to, figure more things out. But that's all part of the journey, man. I mean, by the time I was 20, I know how bad I knew how bad it was because I compartmentalized so much that I was losing hair. Like I was crowning a little bit. Plus, I mean, hell, I was living the COVID life before, COVID was even real. I was at home. I'd get up at 8 p.m. because I just do all my night shift stuff. And then I hired a guy my best friend to do all the day dispatch. And because night dispatch was where they had all the great rates and they needed somebody to be there to manage it. But yeah, it was just you're getting up at 8, you're working out at around 3 in the morning, and then for an hour, then you're finishing your day about 10 a.m., go to sleep, and I'm not leaving my house. Like I'm
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like I got HEB on order, that's the grind, and it's very inhumane to say the least. But and I know a lot of guys who've talked to me recently about it. They're like, I don't know how you did it. And they were the ones telling me that I need to have more balance, but at the same time, where I am today is because of those sacrifices that I made back then. And I wouldn't, I mean, as much as my internal, body is thinking I'd never do that again, I wouldn't want to change it for the world. So that's where it came from.
Yeah, I heard an interesting, completely unrelated topic, but it was around somebody who was in more my age, and he was a Green Beret. And the interviewer had asked him, he said, could you go back to the time you got your Green Beret and go through that training again? So I'm going to kind of pose the same question to you. Could you do that again right now if you had to?
Yeah, I could do that again. I mean, right now, I think as you build and you do it again, or as you've done it again and again and again, there's little things that I do now that I don't even think about. It's like you kind of change because humans have the best ability to adapt. And my thought process used to be that I need to go and find a vacation. I need to go and be somewhere else in order to relax. Now I've created a life that I don't need a vacation from. I enjoy what I do. I know exactly why I do it for my family and for my future family that I have. And that's what's important to me. So that's what kind of keeps me sharp. And then I've just done a lot of research, a lot of stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, a lot of I really focused on Jim Rohn a lot in regards to his philosophies and how he's able to really keep the forefront of your success being more internal versus kind of the success of your company, and making yourself a person who has a great identity, and not just a rich person or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's my goal. It's just being someone who is worthy of those titles and somebody who can be very virtuous and have integrity with what they're doing. And that's at the same time, that's kind of unheard of at times when it comes to trucking, because it's such a cutthroat industry.
Right.
It's not impossible. But you just have to stick with it all the time. Yeah, we get our bad apples. Yeah, you get a lot of problems. A lot of people who let emotion run their day. But if I've been at it this long, you tell me to go work at night and do it all over again, I'm gonna tell you. I mean, as long as I got a couple of things that the two things that I need right now to keep me sharp, I should be fine. It'll suck, but I know why I'm doing it now. At 18, I didn't know why I was doing it. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
this has got to be worth something. I'm not paying myself. I'm not doing anything. I'm not taking vacations. I'm just repeating the same thing. It felt like insanity. But now I already know that was never the case. I was just laying a brick as perfectly as it could be laid every single day. And now at this point, that's the foundation I live on.
Yeah, I kind of want to go back to that again. I sort of asked it. I'm going to re-ask the question because so as you're 18, you don't know why you're doing it. Why were you doing it? Like, why not just stop? Like, why even go through with the trick? Like, what was the driving force? Like, what
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
making you do that?
So the driving force for me initially was I want the nice boats and the nice cars
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. I want to have a go to Miami and do all these the things that are nice and lavish that you see on your phone. I'm tired of just watching people do it. I want to go live it. I want to be a part of that. But how am I going to do that when I'm sleeping on a couch or I'm sleeping on an air mattress at home? Like I can't. And so I need to make an unrealistic change to be something unrealistic in the future. And I knew early. I was like, everything that I'm gonna do, it's because by the time I'm 30, I want to be like retired. Like I want to be able to spend time with my kids. Like that was really big for me. And so that that really basically, honed itself early. And then after that, after I signed the dotted line on a few trucks, and then you kind of take that plunge, that weight never leaves your shoulders ever
Mm-hmm.
again. And it's like you can live with it, you can suffer with it. It doesn't matter as long as just know that it's either that or you just go bankrupt. So it's like whenever I think about that and dealing with the stress and how, sometimes you didn't know you had too much month at the end of your money or different ways you had to figure out different ways to survive and scrape through. Um, but at that point, by the time you kind of get to those levels, you're like, I've already done so much and I owe it to myself not to fail at this point. And then and of course, from a religious standpoint, I'm like, did not put me here to fail in general. And this has got to be worth something. And I would always tell myself that. I mean, motivation is daily for me. It's like brushing your teeth because that stuff goes away like that after you start getting into the thick of the mud of what's going on. And that's where it started. It started to just snowball slowly but surely. And yeah, I hated it. I hated it all the time. There was points in time where I hated trucking. I was like, man, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't know why I picked this. I could have taken my full scholarship to Baylor, but instead I stayed here and started my company and stuff. And um I for a couple of years I saw that as a regret. But then after a while I started getting going. We started having more and more and more good things happen. We started preparing. We started having more defenses built up in trucking, which is, just levers that you can pull in case something happens. It all just kind of you instead of going and trying to search and be successful in someone else's kingdom, you try and create your own. And that's what it ended up becoming. And the more I saw that, the more gratified I became. And then slowly but surely people started investing in what we were doing. And when I just their time as employees and as teammates and stuff. And that was awesome to see, just creating a culture of people who actually care. And that was my next big step. At that point I was like, I need to be the best leader I can possibly be. So that became the next journey for me in personal development, and that just hasn't stopped. It's just a consistent seeking of wisdom, and everything that I've done or seen has pointed me to, hey, you need to double down, you need to continue to lean in, you need to be intentional, you need to be every step you take, it's got to be with intention. These type of things ended up being things that define me, and when I look internally, that's what I want to define me. And so I don't let my business at all define me, like my endeavors as you see them. My biggest thing is being a person who is full of that integrity, able to be virtuous, and if I had to start at zero again, be a person who can build back up if he needed to.
So there's a comment I want to make around something you said in the question to follow, not related. So the comment that you made of people on your team showing up, and you use the term investing. It probably for me professionally is one of the most rewarding experiences that I can think of, is when people care as deeply as you do, or almost anyway, about the thing that you've built. It is beyond, it still to this day just absolutely humbles me in ways that I can't really quite describe. It is really a remarkable. So I want to second that statement and just add a little bit more, a little more volume to it, because it is, for those of us, for those of you who are listening and have started businesses before, and you have people, growing in the same direction, it's just what an honor. The question that I have is, how did you think about? No, I'm gonna ask this question first. Tell me about a miracle, because what you've done is impossible, right? Like there are certain things that you look at and be like, businesses are, in many cases, when you get to a certain scale, to a certain point, it's impossible. Tell me about a miracle that occurred from when you started this business to today, because they don't not happen in situations like this.
I think one miracle that happened. That's a good one. I remember one time when I was still at my parents' house. I was looking at my budget and I was like, I have 60 days. I have to get this amount of money in 60 days, and I have absolutely no way of doing it. I've utilized all my trucks. My drivers are being utilized, and I have no idea what to do next. Because I would say it's about the time where basically Amazon developed their app for logistics. It just became saturated so quickly that most companies who didn't pivot are not here today. And back then, I remember vividly, I created a website, a little high school, like, in high school, you create a little
Hmm.
PowerPoint website. I created one, and I got a call from this guy. His name is Marco. And to this day, yeah, I still remember him. And he was like, "Hey man, I got this opportunity. I have these round trips going out of San Antonio. I had this trucking company in El Paso that's doing them. They're charging me way too much. Can you do it?" And I said, "Absolutely. I'll give you a shot." Because most of my stuff was already dwindling. Like, it felt like I was living by the seasons and I was screwed. And at the same time, whenever he gave me a call, it was hauling just retail packaging, and then also hauling some additional, I would say, additional general freight. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I mean, this maybe is a small shipper or something like that. No, it turned out to be some Fortune 500 company that was like, hey, we've been doing this one way and just depending on this trucking company for years. And shoot, after working with them for 7 months, I kicked out two trucking companies because of their service and in comparison to ours. And of course, from there, it just kicked off into one of my biggest customers that I had at that point. And that's what saved me because it was more consistent. And of course I didn't know that type of consistency before. All I was depending on back then was, my the retail market. So your fourth quarter was crazy. You had to plant in the spring or you're gonna beg in the fall. Especially in the fall back then, or being the spring, vice versa. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In Q4, we had to really save up as much as possible because that first quarter would kill us,
Right.
kill us. And so um, this became just 24/7 all the time. You had a couple weeks where you're off throughout the year and that's it. And that was a miracle for me. That was like, I did not know that, that was going to be that type of logistics was even possible because of course I never looked back then. I was just holding on to the opportunity that I had. And it just created a whole new dimension of revenue for us that made me survive, I will say, because we wouldn't have been here today. The hardest thing I always tell other trucking companies, and the reason I bring it up is because it was around 10, 15 trucks. The hardest thing that you go through is that from 0 to 20 trucks. It's the hardest thing. Of course, it gets a little, I will say it doesn't get easier, but I will say that you are dealing with everything from 0 to 20 trucks. And I remember I was up every single night, 3 a.m. because my, some driver had busted an airline or had a flat tire and stuff, and I wasn't sleeping, nothing. I mean, it was just so much going on, and it came to the point where you're just so desensitized with it, and you're just wanting to give up consistently, and yeah, I remember it to this day. But that was a miracle that kind of really pushed us into a scalable supply chain versus just one of your usual, guys who kind of ebbs and flows with the industry.
Yeah.
So yeah, that definitely changed us.
Yeah, it's kind of the how is none of your business, right? You're kind of
Yeah.
looking at your numbers, you're like, this is not possible, but it's faith trumps all, right? It's just like I know it's going to work, but trying to figure out how can sometimes be crazy making. So you just kind of let
Yeah.
it go and let it go with the flow, right?
I'm telling you, I mean, the biggest thing is just trying to prepare. The thing that I tell other people is you're trying to prepare yourself for that 90-minute opportunity, that 90-minute meeting with the CEO, or that 20-minute call that's going to change the trajectory of your company. You have to be prepared for it. How can you be prepared for it if you're not developing yourself, developing your company's brand or background, trying to be as approachable as possible? Those are the things that most people need to think about versus, of course, trucking more than anyone. There is so much FUD out there, like life, woe is me stuff. This is
Mm-hmm.
awful. Trucking is down. We've been in a trucking recession for the past 23 months. Whereas, albeit that's true, but at the same time, that doesn't give you any excuse to not go out there and work twice as hard to survive. And that's what we had to do. I mean, I'm not complaining and just sitting atop of an ivory tower. Like it has been the same grind ever since 2016. I've just been able to manage it better, or use things that help me manage it better, like a cold plunges and, like, or eating right, making sure that vitality is key to success. Learning all those things early, push me to not have to go seek vices and get dragged down by things that other people use to keep themselves up.
I think you and I consume a lot of the same podcast, books, and media based on some of the comments around the gym runs and the cold plunges. So yeah, definitely we're there.
I'll wait for the links. You got it.
What's that?
I'll wait for the links.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is. I like the way this conversation's gone. This is we're sort of in like motivational speaking territory, which I actually figured we would be based on just the. I kind of knew this is what we're going into, and I'm really grateful for it. So, talk to me about today. So, the journey, the grind, the 0 to 20 trucks. And I think just to kind of add again, a bit of depth to that, I think what the call out here is that's like any new business, you're just dealing with the, every day is, you don't know what you don't know, and you're crossing those barriers. You're a small company trying to do big things. You're in that weird, awkward stage where you've got big boy bills, but you're still a small company that's trying to like reach into, your customers are looking at you as a small company. You look at your finances, you're like, this feels like a big company.
Sure.
There's a lot of, it's an awkward stage between small to mid-sized business. And I think that growing pain, a lot of die in that process. And I think also that there's probably another inflection point. Maybe you can tell me what that is from a truck count, but I know just from other businesses, when you cross certain revenue thresholds, because what you end up having to do is now hire, you're like, your profits at a certain point, you're doing well. But in order to grow to that next phase, it's time to invest in management layers. And that gets tricky because it's not totally accretive. It's like, I had a driver, I had a truck, I had revenue. But you add a manager, they don't necessarily, you can't add an actual dollar figure to them specifically. So you kind of have to invest in that. So when did that happen for you? When did you have to start flatlining again to invest in the next stage of growth, sort of post 20?
So, I mean, for me, it was a little different back then. Since I didn't pay myself anything, I mean, I didn't want anything. I just wanted the business to be successful for a long time. It was easier for me, but I will say, I looked to who was close to me first. That's one thing that I do want to highlight. If you have somebody you trust, make the decision to get them to buy into your campaign. If you can do that early, then those will be your core personnel. They'll stick with you. Mine have to this day. But back then, I mean, he was also, poor. He didn't have much. So I was just paying him just above what he was making at the local washer company, or like they call it the wash tub here. Basically just a car cleaning company. And I told him, just give it a shot. It's going to be a lot, but give it a shot. Stay with me and let's do it. And to this day, he's one of my operations managers, and he's living his life a little comfy and stuff. And it's great because he stuck with it. So finding those people who can share your grind early really helps. And also you'll probably be able to adjust your numbers because you'll have more productivity on top of that versus if it was just you. He goes and, say for example, you're working on the broker side or like with brokers, he'll have more opportunities to work with you. Or say if they're working nights, he can book all the stuff during the night. Say he's also handling a lot of your problems during the night. You're getting a full night's rest. You're then able to actually go out and seek new business, better business. There's a lot of opportunity costs on top of that in regards to just the revenue phase that most people don't really see until you get to that point, like until it actually happens. Once you actually have somebody, you're like, oh, like I didn't get woken up today. Oh, I actually have this Friday. That's basically that's more important almost sometimes when it comes to the longevity of your business. It's like yourself, your well-being, sometimes getting a couple hours to just kind of not do something while your guys take care of it. That means the world, and I think that's worth the money. And so by the time I get to by the time I got to about 18 to 20 units, that's where I was already like, hey, I gotta grab somebody else who's able to help me with this. I'm unable to do this by myself anymore. Of course, by then you run into a lot of problems with drivers.
Hmm.
Sometimes a lot of guys, if you find drivers you trust as well, that makes it even so much better, because then you're able to, kind of just let it sit and forget, because they act, when you make money, they make money, and so on and so forth. But by the time you get to, around those 15, 18 trucks, you're hiring guys based on a couple interviews and then running with it.
Hmm.
It's a different story. You got to manage them, you got to lead them like babies, and that's where you're going to lose a lot of time to expand your business and grow your business, or you'll be stuck in that whirlwind. So that's what my thought process was on whenever that happened back then. And it also depends on whether or not you have a local supply chain, or if you have an over the road supply chain. Over the road, you'd probably do it sooner, just because these you can have a couple of people who can just stay on the phones and work remotely. We have back then, if I had the opportunities or things that I knew now, and from Chat GPT, from
This was my next question. So yeah, go for it. Like I want to hear this. Yeah.
from just oh my god, just so much, like so many tools. I had a Windows 7 dial-up computer that could barely connect to freaking CH Robinson's portal, and I had to just look at a load board that was crap. I mean, internet truck stop was barely, or they were up, but it was slow, man. And at back then I had I just didn't have any tools, so no vision. So all I had was, okay, this is making me money. I have to cling on to this as much as possible. And it didn't take me very long to find other opportunities. But if I had the tools like ChatGPT that I use daily, or we utilize, of course, we paired up with Samsara really early, and that helped my team kind of get all the real time notifications and send them directly to my customers. Back then, I was emailing my customers every single hour, like
Hmm.
every hour I was emailing them. Here's where they're at. Here's where they're at. Here's where they're at, because I had such a dedication to service, because I did not want to lose them. And yeah, man, it just changed the game for us, man. Because back then it was, I mean, we were in an office that didn't even have air condition, and you're just there doing these repetitive updates by yourself, while you're also trying to maybe grow the business, or maybe have a couple of thoughts that are not negative. Um, you know, Compared to now, like whenever you can automate so much of it, you can utilize the entire world. I mean, I have people working throughout the United States with me, and of course a couple from like Mexico as well, who love doing what we're doing, from a like tracking and tracing, or all their smaller administrative stuff. That it just changed the game for me, and all those things I had to slowly pick up, slowly learn. And if I had that back then, man, oof, it'd be a different story, I feel.
Outside of maybe tools, but knowledge. So if you were to go back, if you could go back in time knowing what you know now, forget the tools for a second, what would you have done differently?
I would not have been as emotional all the time when it came to my business. I was way too tied to its success. Um, I was way too tied with not having enough all the time. And it always felt like I didn't have enough, but I was putting all as most business owners do, I was putting all my security based on my liquidity. And the bottom line was, I when I finally realized, it was when I paid off my first couple trucks, is trucking is a life cycle. Trucking companies will make their money at the end of the life cycle of those units, and I didn't realize that, because I was like, man, I feel like I'm kind of just working for banks at times. And most people would say that, because of course you have those longer, you have those 60-month loans for brand new trucks, or you have 48 months, etc. And you're utilizing that, leveraging that truck because you can make a greater profit each and every month in order to pay that truck and then some. And then by the end of it, you're getting a depreciated $35,000 truck. But if you do that enough, eventually that equity build ends up kind of being a big difference for me. If I knew any of that, if I even knew what equity was back then, that would have kind of changed the game of how I thought about everything, how I thought about the short term versus the long term. Because right now I'm thinking, give me 5, 10, give me 3.5 more years. I'll know exactly where I'm at from an equity standpoint, and we will be able to brush through hell or high water, but we didn't have that mindset yet. And that another thing I would say was being more accounting savvy. I will say that there's a lot of times where trucking companies become runaway trains, and you will drop money bags on the ground consistently, where companies will come in and they will offer you a service that does a couple of things that you need them to, and then you're paying that service for the next 2 years. But in all reality, you could have in-housed it. Or the same thing when it comes to comparing rates for truck repair. Because whenever I started my own truck repair shop, it was night and day, because I could actually manage what's going on in my repairs. I wouldn't get upcharged for anything. Those are the type of things that I wish I knew early, and I would have seen it if I would have had an eye to a couple hours every weekend to just learn the accounting software of what's going on. Or go ahead.
So is it fair to say then that how would you mitigate that going back in time? This is I know hypothetical, obviously, but
Yeah.
do you say that the emotionality, because you felt that created so much, it just took up so much free rent in your mind that you weren't able to, have those extra hours on the weekends because you were basically just stressed out?
Yeah, precisely. I think,
Yeah.
and it ruins relationships. It ruins any creativity. It, worry and fear ruins all of that. And then you're able to. That's why I became such a student of stoicism. So I was like, man, I need to control only what I can control. I need to stop worrying about what I'm not. And that changed everything. I mean, I feel like as long as you keep you're putting your head down and you are grinding. And yes, some days most things won't go your way. But the days that it starts going your way, it's because of your action that you've had repeated from that past 6 months.
Yeah.
And I didn't start seeing that until years after, which was painful. But at the same time, I will say myself, as well as the manager that I talked about, his name is Derek. It's the hardest thing that we ever done, and there's probably won't be anything mentally harder that we could do. And so that's the key takeaway from it. I mean, I would not. I know for a fact of what I've been capable of to sustain myself in a dark pit for years. I was able to do that. I don't think there's much that could crack me right now from an instantaneous standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think, and that's a good call it on the stoicism. I think it's a good call it on the control. I mean, it's such a, I think it's the greatest human addiction, is this control. And it's really interesting because it's something that we have, when you zoom out to think about what we control, it is such a tiny, tiny amount of things. It's almost nothing, right? And so, but it's one thing to, to know of it. It's another thing to know it. And so to have this, idea around doing that. And I think in an industry like trucking that is so, it's such a hair on fire space, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, like the truck broke down, the driver quit, the freight's not there, the shit, like, well, God, I could sit here and spend the rest of an hour just doing like itemized like fires that happen, and maybe I'll give you some space to do that. When we first kicked off this call, you said, like, let's talk about the things I love and the things I hate. And I think we talked about a lot of the growth and a lot of the things that ultimately have been rewarding. And I don't want to dwell on the things that you hate, but maybe talk a little bit about, I think your perspective would be super interesting, just because of A, getting to know you a little bit, and B, I think your age. So I think you've got a particular, just different point of view than a lot of people in this industry. What do you think needs to change in this industry? What do you think is maybe broken but solvable?
So when it comes to the trucking industry, a lot of what I've seen is the successful people are the people who are able to take advantage of any type of system or niche that they have been able to come upon, you know? And so then you have the people who are taking advantage, and then you have the complainers. So there's not anything, so the industry in itself is just it's like two people fist fighting, and the another guy is just kind of watching and betting. It's just always feels like that. Um what I just don't think there's anything I would change, specifically because any changes seem unrealistic, because nothing will change. Um and what I mean by that is, you're in a capitalistic society. You're not going to have all of a sudden shippers rally around and say, I just want to work with carriers. You're
Right.
not going to all of a sudden see, you might see brokers phased out because of artificial intelligence, but that's another thing that capitalism precedes. It's just software developers who have found a great tool, who are able to automate people's jobs from a white collar and blue collar standpoint, and and they're going to take advantage of that. That's all it is. It's so that's what in regards to trucking in general. I think that as long as there's a driver on the seat, and as long as it's not, just a bunch of robots which it comes in the next 15, 20 years, then it's all going to be about relationships, and it's all going to be about understanding the entirety uh of that greed, almost, and so I was blatantly aware of that whenever guys trampled me in a rate grab and took away a key part of my business 3 years ago. I was blatantly aware of that. I was aware of that whenever a shipper came in, learned all of the ways that I'd handled the logistics of their shipments, and then kicked me out after they bought 5 trucks and figured it out. I'm aware of that. That's just business. And so that's what I think about trucking in general. I don't think there's anything that will change, and I'm too much of a realist to kind of speculate on if there's going to be any real change for us, because I just assume it's going to be much more of the same greed, and also shippers not going to pay more, and they're going to figure out how to pay less. Specifically because if I was a shipper, that's exactly what I would do.
Hmm.
And I have that perspective. You have to have that empathy in order to understand maybe it doesn't get better. So now this is your environment. Now you have to be aware of it, and be able to be successful in it. And you have to find ways to do it, because there are ways. Trucking companies that are in niches right now, they are killing the game. I mean, I've talked to guys all the time, and they're like, we're fine. We're not, they're just not the ones tweeting about it. They're
Right.
just
Right.
working it. So, yeah, I know it's kind of a spin on what you said. And I do have more technical analysis on just kind of everything that's happened, and my processes of how we've been successful. But yeah, I don't think much will change. I just think that overall people will eventually need more things. The supply chain will start to grow. And of course there's a lot of changes in the supply chain, like, as such as Mexico being a bigger exporter, and we're getting less and less from China, you name it. I think that those things are going to shift the consumer, the supply chain map. But other than that, there's going to be no big changes until you start to see that hammer fall, where shippers are going to finally say, okay, everybody wants stuff. I'm going to start selling. I'm going to start tripling my production. We're still waiting for that. And that's where that's why you had COVID, and that's why you had the fallout after it, so, and even before that, it wasn't great. So it's just how it is. That's what trucking is.
What are your plans for the next 5 years? How are you thinking about? So you'll be 31. Is the goal still to retire at 30?
No,
Because 30 is not nearly as old as you think it is when you're 18, eh?
I'm not sure, Justin. My knees are starting to hurt.
I've never worked in an unair conditioned pit for nights, so maybe it's easy for me to say.
Hey man, in Texas, it's a big
Oh,
difference.
buddy, I bet. I was actually going to ask you. I thought you mentioned San Antonio a few times, so I figured you're from
Yeah,
Texas. I was like, I can't
yeah,
even imagine that. I'm from
yeah.
Toronto and I can't even handle the heat, so I don't even know what that would be like.
Well, then again, the other side of that is I just wore two layers, and it was 62 degrees this morning. So
Right. Yeah, opposite side. Yeah.
yeah, but I
Yeah.
mean, overall, what was your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just like what are your future again, future plans, but like maybe aspirationally, and I'm it's kind of like this can be personal business. You can take this wherever you want. So over the
Yeah,
next
yeah, yeah.
5 years, again, and I ask you this specifically because you're I think you think about these things. So I want to hear
Oh
what your
yeah.
thoughts are. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're if you're talking about a businessman, there's probably a good chance that he's thought about what'll happen if he dies. And I
Yeah.
think it's common because we have our whole like plan and everything. So
Yeah. Yeah.
overall for the next 5 years, my goal was to kind of I realized trucks depreciate. I need to get some appreciating assets. I bought my first fourplex 2 months ago, and I'm still hoping to grow that and just focus on utilizing properties in the future that will be able to cash flow over time, but also just build more equity. So by the time I hit 35, or I would say 31 rather. I'm trying to at least get another couple more properties, and then other than that, I should be married by then. Considering she still says yes by then.
Yeah.
And hopefully have some kids by the time I hit. My plan is going perfectly, by the way.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm trying to have a kid, my first kid by 28, 29, and then every 2 years after, we'll see how that goes. Hopefully, have three of them, four of
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
and other than that, just I would say from a longevity standpoint, keep trucking in general a big part of what I'm doing, at least until we find even either we find a better opportunity or and the only better opportunity I could see would be in owning the land or real estate in other areas, commercial specifically, since we do have our first commercial property. It's about 38 acres out in the south side of San Antonio, and just building from there. Um, but I just don't. Me personally, I don't see myself having idle hands. I know for a
Hmm.
fact I'll be doing something, but I will be pushing to be intentional in other people's lives. That's really my biggest thing. Whether it's my family, my kids, or just the guys that I try and steward right now. And yeah, I mean, overall, ever since I was young, I had guys calling me boss or stuff like that. So age didn't really affect me after a while. There wasn't a person that I couldn't talk to because I knew for a fact that just like you, we both put our head in a pillow at night. So whether it was the president of a Fortune 500 companies or executives or whether it's celebrities, and what it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I mean, we've talked to a few, and I just realized the connectivity piece is one of the gifts that I have. So I try to just connect, and in that connection, be able to be intentional with that person and try and make leave you with something. That's really my key goal, because my goal is always just focusing on finding wisdom, and that's my bottom line. And seek and you shall find. So hopefully that'll by the time I hit 31, I'll know a little bit more.
Well, you shared a ton today. You're as you sort of just alluded to, you're well wise beyond your years, and if your goal is to sort of teach and shepherd, you taught me some stuff today. So I think that your mission is well underway, and obviously thriving. So man, I really appreciate you finding the time to spend with me today and dropping some of this knowledge on me. That was really refreshing. So thank you for this conversation. That was this was excellent, and I'm sure our listeners enjoyed it just as much as I did.
Absolutely, Justin. And I know that I do have a bunch of technical analysis and different things that I do in order to make my business successful that I try and relate out to guys. And so if
Go ahead, man. Go ahead. I'm not. Yeah. Go. Tell me. Give me some. Give me
Hey
some
man,
highlights.
I'll go.
Yeah.
I'll go. I mean, I
Yeah.
will say that the one thing that I knew I did want to talk about was just um from a process standpoint. What really helped my business kind of scale in general was
Yeah.
just to be that developing of processes and labeling them. That was one thing that to my core. My whole team uses it. I used to in the past, whenever we didn't have the internet that we utilize it as much as we do now. We had specific trucks. By the time you have 18 trucks, 20 trucks, I listed them all down zero to 20, and then you start to circle a time. I call them circle times of when you're going to check that truck next. And so those are created circle times. Now we do it all online. We still call them circle times, but it's just people push on those processes. They're able to then improve said processes. And so whenever we do risk checks, for example, risk is weather, issues on the road, hours of service, you name it, all those things that keeps your mindset focused on safety and mindset focused on different risk mitigation techniques. And I think that whenever I do tell business owners, I know you're probably almost out of time.
No, we're not. Go.
I know you commonly tell business owners about specific things they need to watch out for versus just, hold on and put your head down. It's actually learning how to label the things that happen, because every single issue that you're going to go through is gives you the ability and the opportunity to make a process and label it. Then you're able to have some rule book. I had a rule book of around 300 things that we went through once, but I brought somebody in new. I said, don't do anything but look at this rule book consistently until you kind of understand what's going on. And then I realized I'm going to repeat myself 7, 8 times. So then I partnered with Loom to create a small little syllabus of, well, it's not small now. It's basically, I'd say around 102 videos of all of our processes, and then why we do them and what happened in order for us to get to that point. And now I can onboard a guy in 2 weeks, and I wouldn't need to talk to him very much just other than the initial interview. And then I'll understand based on his note taking where he's at. And that just changed the game. I think that just focusing on, like, especially right now with ChatGPT, I'm like, here's my problem. I'm running into this problem. I have a communications problem with my team. I'm unable to get pictures from my text. My phone is super big. What would you do? It'd probably give you a VoIP, like dial pad, or maybe a Telegram, telecommunications, so that you can group everybody up. That's the type of stuff that will excel your business. Those small things will change your business in ways that you have no idea. And then you'll end up being a core piece of your business, like some of those things are for mine. And so if you are just sitting around thinking of problems, write them down, and then you're able to research with it. I always say leverage ChatGPT now, that because if I had it back then, I'd know everything by now. So I think that those are just some things I did want to highlight from a more technical analysis of like business ownership in general. But yeah, Justin, I think there could be other things as you go along, and a lot of it comes from your own internal self. I know we talked more about that. So yeah, I appreciate you letting me hit a tangent there.
Oh, buddy, no problem. And I'm actually going to ask you a follow-up question to that, because there's this book called E-Myth, and I forget who writes it, but it's a book basically on describing what you just described. It's about running process and business and how to practically do that and label that.
Yeah.
What are some books any books that you would recommend? Because it sounds like, again, you got a wealth of knowledge, and some of this is organic and some of this is inorganic. Is there anything that really strikes you as a book that really helped you through this journey, whether process, emotionally, intellectually?
Yeah, so it really depends on where you're at. I think that where you think about one thing I will say is read a bunch. Don't just read the easy stuff. Don't read the mental candy of what's going on. Read the really technical stuff that is kind of hard to process. That's my first thought when it comes to your initial books to look at for success, because your niche is totally different. If whoever's listening, your niche is totally different from mine, or Justin's, or etc. So you have to be able to find people who have went and wrote about said things. And so maybe your issue is communication. Then you're going to read Pitch Anything. You're going to read about hostile communication. You're going to read about conflict resolution. Say your issue is leadership, then John Maxwell is going to be your guy for the next 2 months. And you can really focus on those laws of leadership that he has. I still remember a lot of them because I wasn't a good leader. I had to learn that. And I had to learn how to read people. And in order for me to, I had to learn at 18 when my voice wasn't even, my voice was cracking all the time. And guys who were 50 were trying to ask me what to do next. Those things are, other people are living those things, so you can learn from them early beforehand. And then the third thing would be the hard stuff would be stuff like Ray Dalio. When he was principles was big for me, because that changed my thought process and was able to give me a ability to, or thought, I would say a formula to scale my business correctly. And yeah, it's a long read. It's like 700, 900 pages.
Yeah.
At the same time, like you just leave a book open on your nightstand, leave a book open on your kitchen island, and leave a book open on your office desk. I guarantee you eventually you'll put down your phone and you'll keep on progressing, progressing. I do that all the time. I have 3 different books that are in 3 different areas, because you have to make it easy for you to make that hard choice, So those are the 3 books I recommend. How to Win Friends and Influence People was influential for me, as well, by Napoleon Hill. I recently read his other one, Outwitting the Devil, and that one hit me very hard, especially more from a more, I would say, almost religious standpoint, but at the same time, just giving you those eyes of what the world wants from you. Right now, the world wants your mental real estate, and a business needs all of your mental real estate. So it's either which dog are you going to feed, and that's such a great reminder, and it's encouraging whenever you start making the correct choice week after week after week.
Yeah.
So those are a few for sure.
Okay,
I mean,
man.
David Goggins, I had a David Goggins binge just recently, but who doesn't want to just go run 150 miles?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I like that stuff right now too. Andrew, this was a pleasure, man. Thanks. And yeah, I like the little bonus we just did. So I'm not going to do a long goodbye as I already did it, but that was great, man. I look forward to meeting you and seeing you again in the future. I think our paths are sure to cross.
100%, Justin. I appreciate the time, and y'all stay warm up there.
Okay, buddy. And you stay cool down there.
Appreciate it.
Okay. All right. See ya. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this fine podcast of ours called Freight Famous.